why is everything so expensive? Growing up, we were told you could go to college, get a six-figure job, and that meant you would buy a house with that white picket fence, get a car, get married, have kids. That was the American dream, right? But then we got older and none of that happened. 60% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. Houses cost hundreds of thousands to over $1 million. Grocery prices keep going up, and the United States has $1.6 trillion worth of student debt. Nobody can afford to have kids. The American dream was a lie. Even the idea of a six-figure salary as making it isn't really true anymore. If you want to own a home and have kids, 0 of the 50 states make that possible to do with $100,000 or less. Even if you look up only the 3 states with the lowest cost of living, over $100,000 is required, and there is a $30,000 gap between the median income and what it would take to have that life. The American dream is dead, and corporate greed killed it because it didn't used to be this way. This is not about left versus right or Republican versus Democrat. This is about ultra wealthy and corporations taking advantage of working class people, as they have been doing for decades. And what's so sad is it did not used to be this way. We used to have a growing middle class. We used to have housing affordability and a quality of life that was attainable for average working class people. So when did the American dream die? When did this idea of owning a home and having kids feel completely unattainable and unrealistic to an average person? Well, that is exactly the question we set out to solve here today, because this is the result of a lot of very shady economic things, shady politics, as most of it is. And really, I just think like a wake-up call, hopefully, for people as to like how crazy and bad the American standard of living is. Like, it is outrageous. I have compiled data. This is like a 7-page Razor's document for this episode about like statistics and finances and literally like why our generation cannot afford anything. Gen Z and millennials, like we are really getting ripped off by this system that is bubbled and is really going to pop in our lifetime. It's essentially like my thesis of this episode. I'm going to go into a lot of the historical evidence of the way that has happened, and also why just the cost of living and everything is so expensive. Groceries are more expensive. Insurance is more expensive. Cars are more expensive. Like everything is. And that is, you know, I hear a lot of people say things like, oh, the economy's broken. And what's sad is the economy is working exactly the way it was designed. It's just not advantageous to you and I. Like, it was not designed to be that way. It was designed to keep rich people richer, keep corporations bigger. Like, that is where so much of it is. And again, we got a lot to get through, a lot of interesting evidence that I'm excited to present to you. So with that, welcome back to Nicky at Night. I'm your host, Nicky Reardon, and I'm so excited to be here with y'all. We are, at the time of recording this, at 99,200 subscribers. So I feel like by the time this is posted, we'll have got to 100K. I'm saying that in a manifestation. Thank you. Holy wait, I can't say holy heck. Wow. I did not believe that this was going to happen, especially not this fast. I freaking love doing this. It is so much fun. I love to talk to you guys every single week. It is like researching these things is like exciting for me. It's like a good brain exercise. And I'm just so excited for what this show is going to be. I really want to think of ways as to like how we can step it up and do more stuff. I'm really excited to do more interviews and guest episodes. But also like I would love to do a 100K special. Like a special bonus episode. So if you guys have any ideas for what that would be, let me know. It doesn't have to be like a specific topic. I think it could just be something fun, or it could be something like having my real life friends on and like talking about that, or just even finding ways. I don't know. I feel like I'm always like talking about things and discussion topics, which is great. I will always do that and love to do that. Like the video essay format will always be what this is, but I'd love to talk about myself a bit more and life and things. I don't know. Or if you guys would like love a Patreon or a Substack, or like, you know what I mean? Like what is exciting and interesting and would get you going. So with that, thank you guys so much. I love y'all. I never forget that you were in the first 100K. Okay. When this is the biggest podcast in the world, when this is a bigger podcast than it is now, you were an OG, and I won't forget that. Okay. So Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Also, please follow us on Spotify, follow us on Apple Podcasts. We are trying to catch up, okay? Spotify and all of those things are much, much harder to grow on. So your support, and if you want to support the show an extra mile, that is how you can do it. And I'll be so eternally grateful. So going back to our declining political system, an economic system where none of us can afford anything and we're all in debt. I guess I really want to start with this concept of like, what is the American dream, and how did that idea come to be? Because I think it's very important and honestly is kind of a piece of propaganda for America, really. At the very least was a message they really held on to and sold to get people, excited about this idea of an American lifestyle. And I think it really traces all the way back to the early 1900s and really this idea of like the nuclear family. And the nuclear family is not like a nuclear bomb. It's nuclear, like nucleus of a cell, meaning like central, standard of living. This idea of like a mom and a dad and 3 kids and owning a home with that white picket fence and the dog and being able to save for retirement and really just like this upward mobility in society, right? Throughout the entire 1900s, every single generation had more money and wealth than the last. Like we were a growing nation with a growing economy, and that actually meant that the working class people were also growing with it. That is not true of the America today. If you look at the data, Gen Z is the first generation to have exponentially less wealth, lower standard of living than the generation prior, than our parents and then millennials even. And that is really terrifying. We are, for the first time in American history, seeing blatant regression. And that's really when I talk about this bubble popping, which is kind of going to be my thesis at the end of this video. It's a big takeaway. It's going to be a lot of like data and like interesting and facts that I promise, like all tie together at the end. So this nuclear family, again, like starting in the 1900s really becomes popular in the 1930s, especially with the World War I and World War II sentiment and this very, pro-nationalist sentiment and this idea of America. And that was really exciting at the time. And the American dream has been this thing that has existed even before then. And outside of just, this economic standard where you think of like the nuclear family, again, like mom, dad, 3 kids, house, there is this cultural significance of the American dream, right? America was the place people went to make their dreams happen, right? That was what Ellis Island was all of these people escaping poverty and war and famine to come to America and build a better life for themselves, right? Like the Statue of Liberty was literally meant to be this beacon that people would see on the horizon in the middle of the ocean, that like you finally made it to that land of prosperity. In that land where, you could pursue your dreams and just try and build a better life for yourself. And that was really what America stood for. And I, even as an American, take a lot of pride in that message. I think that's awesome. And what is very terrifying to me, especially when you think about the state of politics now, is how somehow we've gotten to this place where the idea of like immigration is like only a negative thing. When in actuality, I think that's like one of the most beautiful things about America. Like the Statue of Liberty is literally like a symbol of why people should be excited to come here and should be excited to, build that life for themselves. And it is, I think, just like an extremely privileged take to be somebody who was born in a country with like significantly greater economic stability, political stability. We haven't had a war on American soil since like the Civil War. Like we live in a society that's so privileged to be away from those things. And this idea of people not like wanting to share that with people who didn't get that luck. It is where you are born is luck of the draw. Like you did nothing to allow that to happen, especially when it comes to this idea of like, people escaping these war-torn countries or poverty and like all of that. Like it is not, like people always have the luxury to like spend years on an immigration process when they are coming from a country that is like going through civil unrest and war. Like sometimes you need to escape that first, and that's why the immigration system was designed that way. That is why there was these ideas of people being able to come here and seek asylum here and then apply for their immigration. And I don't know, it's just a very like scary thing, how this idea of the American dream, and when I talk about it being a piece of propaganda, how like its definition has changed over time. But really, I do think that this like economic side of the American dream has always been this thing that we were sold on, especially in our youth, like you go to high school and then you go to college and you get a job and you have a house and you have kids and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't work anymore. So how did it die? Like literally, when did that idea not become possible or affordable anymore? The answer is really corporate greed, as is most of the problems in American society, as actually society in the world as a whole. We're going to start a lot like talking about like, the 70s and 80s, I think is where things really, really start to deteriorate, because post World War II, America is in a boom, right? Like we won the war. Also, like really the reason America was able to like swoop in that way is like these countries had been fighting for years prior before America ever got involved. So we had significantly more money, significantly more resources, an army that wasn't exhausted. And we were able to, like come in and stop World War II, which is a great thing. And also meant that once the war was over, America was not like in financial ruin or even physical ruin, right? Again, like a lot of these countries have been bombed and had war and their citizens and civilians dying. So America really becomes this global superpower, right? World War II ends in 1945. So we spend the first 2 decades really, really developing as a society. And in the 70s, when good old corporate greed comes in, and honestly, one of the big issues we start to see with our economic society is Ronald Reagan and this idea of Reaganomics, aka trickle-down economics. I want you to like suspend your idea of, like left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. Like I'm just talking about the policies that were implemented, right? What is trickle-down economics? It is essentially this idea or belief that if you give more money to corporations and businesses or just the wealthier people and entities, that they will then take that money and reinvest it back into the economy, right? So if a corporation has a tax break, then they will take that money and then hire more people or open more stores or spend more on marketing and advertising, all right? Like they will take that money and reinvest it into some way that is good for the economy as a whole. And that was sort of the idea around it, that like we're going to cut taxes and we're going to cut regulations and things like that to try and stimulate economic activity. And really what that has proved, and there are many professional economists that have tested this, is that it works in the short term, but does not work in the long term, right? Like a great example of this is that since 1970, the S&P 500 has grown by 3,500%. The median income has only grown by 49%. So for every $1 given to a corporation, 1.4 cents actually made its way to like an American citizen or like an actual person. So where is that money going? It is going to the people at the top. Like people are greedy, and that is a sad reality of our world, right? The salary of a CEO has grown by 1,300% versus a working class person has grown by 49% from 1970 to today. So when these corporations are getting tax breaks and stuff, they're not just like, everybody gets a raise, woohoo! Like people are greedy, and that is a sad nature of reality that we need to account for. And that is why trickle-down economics don't work, right? Like they do it, or they take that money and they buy back a bunch of stock to decrease the supply of stock so that there is less of it, so that the prices increase. Therefore, the shareholder value increases. Therefore, they make more money, right? Like that is the way like these corporate entities work when it comes to having more money to do. Like they're always going to be self-motivated and self-interested, and like that is a reality of the world. And what's interesting is tax cuts give the illusion of a populist message, right? If I go to some person and I'm like, hey, you're paying this much in taxes, next year I'm going to tell you you're going to pay less. Like that sounds really exciting as a voter, that like, oh my God, I would love to pay less in taxes. But it actually benefits rich people way more, right? Like if like 1% of $50,000 versus 1% of $5 million is a massive difference, right? And like, if you're the person making $50,000, paying less in taxes actually, like, it might sound like it's so beneficial to you, but it's really not meant to benefit you. It is meant to benefit the corporation. And that money is not going to trickle down to you, right? Like, you should want them to be taxing rich people more and more to do more things in our society that can benefit all of us, right? Like, that is the point of this. But this is a framing that really, really works. Like, it is really what kind of the economic side of like the Republican Party really built its ideology on. Like, this idea of tax cuts, this idea of less government intervention so that it would stimulate the economy, in air quotes. So this is what Ronald Reagan did, right? He initiated this idea of cutting the taxes for the highest tax bracket. So at the time, again, all these numbers I'm also giving are adjusted for inflation, so you know. So at the time, that would be the equivalent of what is like $400,000 a year today, right? Like, he was giving a tax cut to people who were making over $400,000 a year, which, like, to me, don't, like, you're good. Like, you're a millionaire. What do you mean? Like, you're making like almost $500,000 a year. You're fine, right? So, and what's interesting is also, like, taxes on rich people in America used to be really high. It used to be 70%. So for every $1 you made over that $400 threshold, you were paying 70% of it in taxes. He instantly takes that down to 50%. However, this is like again, like a rhetoric and an ideology that was really embodied and continued all the way to today, where it is 37%, right? So roughly half of what, you know, the ultra wealthy used to pay in taxes, they're paying half of that now. And what's crazier is the corporate tax rate is 21%. Corporations pay less in taxes than you do. Isn't that insane? Like, talk about a crazy system. And this is where when I say people are like, our economic system is broken. I'm like, no, it is working the way it has always been designed to work. It's just the way it is designed to work is not to benefit citizens. It is to benefit corporations. The easiest example of that is literally like human beings, people have a higher tax percentage than corporations do. It is outrageous. And even scarier, like if you look at the legislation trying to be passed right now, the big, beautiful bill wants to cut those taxes even more, which would add $2.5 trillion to the deficit in a loss of tax revenue, which is terrifying. And also, like, I don't think Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk need more tax cuts. I don't think millionaires need more tax cuts. You're fine. Like, it's fine. But somehow that doesn't do it. And also, it was so crazy to me when there's always this idea of like people are talking about, I don't know, like healthcare, and they're like, well, how are you going to afford that? Tax rich people. Like, we used to do that as a society, and people are wondering like, oh my God, how did we fund 2 world wars? We used to tax rich people. Like, that's literally the answer. And it is very easy to do that again. And we should do that again. Like, literally 99% of the world, of the population benefits from that. Like, it's just a very rich and influential people who stop it, which is something we will get to later on. Again, trust me. So this is really what I want to talk about, like the depth of like how bad are things now? Like, you are being so egregiously ripped off in ways that you do not even understand, right? So I'm going to go over some basic pricing, right? Housing. A house in 1970 used to cost $23,000. If you adjust that for inflation today, that is $180,000. What is the median price of a house in the United States in 2025? $431,000. If you put that to a more closer to a city suburban area, it jumps to $800,000. So that is a minimum of a 240% increase. That doesn't account for how the property taxes will be higher, the insurance that you have to pay is higher, the down payment required to buy a house is higher. And in fact, the number one reason people aren't able to afford house these days is because of how outrageous the down payments are, right? Like, if you want to buy a house that's even $400,000, like 10% is 40 grand. Like, most people just have like 40 grand in cash laying around, right? Childcare in 1970 was $700 a year, the equivalent to $6,000 today. Now it is $13,000 a year, 217% increase. Health insurance used to be $450 a year, $3,600 today is now $7,000 a year on average, a near 200% increase. Cars were $3,450 in 1970. adjusted for inflation, $29K. Now a new car is $50K, which is a 170% increase. Again, not accounting for insurance of that car also increases by 170%. Gas for that car increases by even more percentage than that, right? The list goes on and on. And this is a big reason for like the generational gap you feel between you and your parents and you and your grandparents, where they have this sentiment of like, well, when I was your age, ... And it's like, no, you do not understand how much the cost of living adjusted for inflation has increased since when you were like 20 years old, right? Like it is not about that, right? Like all of these things, like a house on average is nearly 2.5 times what it used to be. It's not because Gen Z is lazy or millennials are lazy or that we are irresponsible or we're just a generation that complains. Like what was possible for you at that time is physically not possible for us. And that is where so much of this generational gap comes, because to people, they're like, well, you're 25. And when I was 25, I was married and bought a home. I'm like, I would love to be married and have a home. It is not for a lack of trying, let me tell you, girl, but like, I don't have, $400K lying around. Like I don't. Oh, and this is also then when you get to these like really annoying rhetorics that piss me off, or people like the Dave Ramsey show where like, you got to stop getting that $7 coffee every day. I'm like, you think that me getting a $7 cold brew is why I can't afford a $400,000 house? Like, shut up. Shut up. Like that, it is not because of that. The price of houses have increased by 250%. Like that's why. And because the goalpost is moving further and further away faster than the median income has increased, right? Again, like what I'm saying with this, the way that corporations have gotten richer than exponentially over 100 times richer than like the average person has. And houses are getting, again, like the price of a house has increased by 250%. The increase in income has only increased by 49%. So Gen Z has sort of developed this mentality of like, well, I'm never going to get there, so why try, right? And this is where we get in this idea of like Gen Z doom spending. I saw an article quote this phrase that I loved, like doom scrolling, but doom spending, where because they're like, well, I'm never going to buy a house, so why care? Like, might as well buy those Taylor Swift tickets. I'm never going to buy a house, so I might as well go on that vacation. I'm never going to be able to do this, so and that has created, so now not only is the goalpost moving further away, but you're like not even trying to like reach the goal anymore because it is so egregiously far away, which takes us to the math. Like what would actually be required to get there? So 52% of Americans say that they think they would need $100,000 a year to be financially comfortable. And the six-figure salary used to be this benchmark of making it, right? Like you would finally be able to buy a house and build a savings and save for your retirement and start spending things based on your wants and not just your needs, living paycheck to paycheck. So let's break down, what does that ideal situation look like? Well, ideally, it's like 50% of your income is going to, expenses, rent, groceries, all the stuff you got to do. 20% is maybe going to savings. And then 30% is just like spending, like things you spend, restaurants, getting drinks, whatever. And that is based on a family of 4 for standard living, right? So like a mom and dad, 2 kids, very standard. And this is when I say in all 50 states in the US, you cannot have a home with 2 kids for less than $100,000. Like it is literally impossible. Even the 3 cheapest states, let's look at them. The 3 cheapest states are Minnesota, Arkansas, and Kentucky. And the required income it would take to own a home and have 2 kids and financially support them is over $109,000 for all of them. And the median income is like $70,000. So there is literally no state where that is possible anymore, right? And this is when like an interesting thing, like we've really developed this mentality of like, like 100K is great. And it's really terrifying that like 100K does not even cut it anymore when the median income is like 30% below that. And you need even more money than that 30% gap. Like, and when you look at the most expensive states, something like Hawaii, California, Massachusetts, the required income to have a home and have 2 kids is $250,000 a year, where the median income of those states is $110,000 a year. So that's nearly you would have to double your salary to even like have children is just so insane. And that is what I'm saying. This like people do not realize how egregiously ripped off our generation is. And then looking out of all of the counties in the US that are the most affordable, like just have the lowest cost of living out of any place in the country, only 3% of them have a median income higher than the cost of living. 3% out of all counties in the United States are only places where like people are making more money on average than is required to live. That is how bad it is and how bad it has gotten. It is literally like this idea of corporate greed, and I'm about to give some examples, that have like siphoned money away from the working class into these institutions, right? Again, the S&P 500 has grown 3,500%. The income of a CEO has grown by 1,300%. This income of a person, 49%, right? Like it is outrageous the way that the top 1% in like mass accumulations of wealth are outpacing growth. And that growth has gotten bigger and bigger every single year. And this is really where we're getting into this bubble popping, which is, again, the thesis of this video, where we are having what is called a K-shaped economy, where the rich people keep getting richer and the poor people keep getting poorer. Think of literally the way a K is shaped, right? Like the middle class is shrinking. It's almost non-existent at this point. And how awful that is getting. One of the great examples you're seeing this bubble pop is housing. Houses have become so expensive, and that is very, very good for older people, right? Like my mom and my grandma, like they got to buy a house cheap when a house is $100K, $200K, and now that house is probably $500K to $1 million, whatever, right? Like that's like the standard growth. And that is really, really great for them because they get to sell that and retire, but is absolutely awful for everybody younger than them because nobody can afford that house. And what we are starting to see happen is, especially right now, where nobody can afford the houses. So houses just sit there for so long. Like there's more supply than there is demand. And there's actually like a lot of data starting to come out about housing and how like it is so hard to sell a house right now. Nobody can sell a house because nobody can afford them. It's not that millennials and Gen Z don't want to buy a house. We would love to. None of us have the ability to drop $500K. Like we have exponentially more student debt. We have exponentially more credit card debt. The groceries have gone up. Cars has gone up. Gas has gone up. Like everything is roughly between 150% to 250% more expensive than it was 50 years ago. And because of that, we cannot have these massive financial goals. And also, I think what's really going to happen, I don't know exactly when, but there's so many people who have built their idea of retirement on selling their house, right? Like, you know, like I have this house and I have a little bit of savings, I have a little 401k, but one day I'll be able to sell this property that I own and I paid off the mortgage and I'll accumulate all that money back and I'll use that money to retire. And what's going to happen is people are going to hit the age of retirement, but there will not be enough buyers. Because none of us are dropping $1 million on a house, right? Like we cannot do that. So that is where this really scary thing is going to come in. And also, again, that's what I'm talking about, this bubble popping. Like they were so addicted to the growth of their own money that they are going to cannibalize themselves until money cannot exist anymore. And also what's really awful about this, again, like especially with property and housing, has really furthered this generational divide between older people and younger people because people who already have property don't want there to be more property built in their neighborhood, right? If you have a house that's, let's say, $500,000 or whatever, or I don't know, like the mortgage is $5,000 a month. Again, I'm just making up random numbers in this for this. It's $5,000 a month, right? And if they go and build a bunch of new properties that are, I don't know, only $3,000 a month, what is going to happen to the value of your house? nobody's going to want to buy that house. Nobody's going to want to move into that house because you can get that same area, that same neighborhood, that same school system for a much lower price point. So the people that own property have these things like homeowners associations, and they petition and their city council and things like that to prevent new developments of affordable housing. Like this, and this is not a left versus right issue. This is like, everybody does this across the country. Look, in any state ever, like, people do not want to build affordable housing because they're like, well, my house will decrease in value a little bit. So then the only thing that can get built is like more luxury housing. You see this so often in Los Angeles, how like there are always new apartment buildings, but they are like luxury, massive complexes. And the average rent in one of those things is like $2,500 a month minimum for a 1-bedroom. And people can't, like, nobody can afford that, right? Like, people want more affordable housing. There's so much demand for affordable housing. I'm sure if you surveyed people and said, would you like to live in a new property that costs less rent than you pay now? Yeah, absolutely. Sign me up, right? But they don't build them because people who own property don't want there to be cheaper options than what they have, right? So they just don't build them and make it extremely hard to do that. And that makes it so young people can't afford that. And then also that makes the problem worse, right? If that young person is now having to pay $2,000 or more a month in rent, that means they have less money to save to then buy that house, right? Like, do you see how the problem feeds into itself and perpetuates itself? And this is also like, you know, when we talk about these ideas of like being in a recession, like something that like I think people don't think about enough is like, the way we calculate a recession is kind of dumb. What a recession technically means from an economic standpoint is if we have a quarter of negative GDP growth, 2 in a row, right? So like we had a -1 in Q1 of this year. If we have another one, we will officially be in a recession. But what that doesn't account for is that like GDP is just like a sum of the economy, right? So like if trillion-dollar companies like Apple and Meta and Nvidia and all these massive things, and Google are just doing great, but the rest of the economy is absolutely awful. Nobody can afford a house. We're in a student debt is the highest it's ever been. There's $1.8 trillion in student debt in the United States. Like, the economy's bad. It's bad for 99% of the world, right? But like by definition, it could not be in a recession because Google made a ton of money. And like that, I just hate. Like, I hate the idea of that. Like, it's when people, you know, talk about recession and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just so stupid and bad. So like, what is the cause of this? Really, like, why is this built this way? I truly believe the sad answer for 99% of things in life is lobbying. The amount of money funneled into our government is insane. And it's really sad because we used to have a government that was very good at building things, right? Like, we built the Transcontinental Railroad and the Hoover Dam, and like America was rapidly industrialized. Rapidly. We actually set the blueprint for like what an industrial society would look like. And one of the greatest examples of how far we have come from that now is a high-speed railroad, right? Like, once upon a time, the American government was so eager to build a transcontinental railroad, right? Like, oh my God, it would be so amazing if people can go from the East Coast to the West Coast and we could ship things, blah, blah, blah. And in 2025, like, if you've ever been to a country like Japan, we have technology to where you could get from like LA to Chicago in a few hours on train, a public transit train. And we don't have that. We have had zero initiative or anything to build something like that. Why? Because there is a lot of lobbying from, number one, airline companies, number two, oil and gas companies. Oil and gas companies don't want a railroad. They want people to drive cars. They want people to fly airplanes. Airline companies want people to have to fly airplanes. So they spend tons of money in funding candidates and lobbying the federal government and giving donations to political campaigns for those politicians that will not make that a reality. And what that means is that this influx of money in government has decreased innovation as a society, right? Like, we just blatantly could have a technologically advantageous thing to every citizen of America. And like, we just don't have it. We just don't have it, right? And another great example of this is taxes. TurboTax as a company spends so much money lobbying the federal government because they want people to pay for TurboTax. So because of that, we have a terrible tax system. Like, I don't know if you know this, the idea of like you having to find out how much taxes you owe is like a uniquely American thing. Like in other countries, like the government's just like, you made this much money, this is how much you have to pay here. Like it's very linear, as it should be, right? Or like, why doesn't they just have it on their own government website, right? The reason they don't do that, the reason we don't have these like societal innovations is because there is somebody who is financially invested in keeping things the way they are, keeping things worse. So you have to pay money to rely on this thing. And they pay money to politicians. And that is like the root of, I think, like 99% of causes in America is like somebody got funded by something to prevent that from happening. And it is really, really scary because that's why I say this is not about political parties. Like the Democrats are taking billionaire investments. They are taking those billionaire lobbying things. Same way the Republicans are. Republicans are too. It's just different companies and different industries and different sides. And that's what I'm saying. Like this is not about a left versus right or Republican versus Democrat. Like this is your standard of living. You are being ripped off by your own government. And America did not used to be this way. It didn't. Like it used to be very affordable. It's why your grandparents and your parents are like buying houses in their early 20s, right? Especially when you think about even earlier than that. There used to be a norm that it was like women wouldn't work and a man would have like 3 kids and own a home and have a job and all of these things, right? Like that was the standard. And I think what's very interesting is like when we think about a lot of the gripes that people on the left and right have, I don't think we disagree on the things we're upset about. I think we disagree on the reasons for why we're upset about those things, right? Like great example of this I think about when you think of like the right and like tariffs, right? How they're like, oh, we want to bring back factory jobs to America and factories. Like we don't need factories. And I don't think people even really miss factory jobs. I think they miss the standard of living that existed in the 50s and 60s, like when we were a primarily manufacturing economy, right? Like having tariffs to bring back some random factory job, and let's say Ford Motors opens up a new factory, is not going to magically make you $150,000 a year. Like groceries will still be expensive as they are, and healthcare will still be expensive, and housing will still be expensive. Like all of those things, and that bringing back a factory is not going to change that. What needs to change is these overall standards of living. And I think another great example of this is, like you see like incel guys on the internet and they have these complaints like girls only want a guy who's going to take them on these dates and has a house and blah, blah, blah. And girls are just gold diggers. And they blame women for that. And I'm like, okay, like the reason, like I see why you're upset, but think about why can't you afford a house? Why can't you afford to take her to dinner, right? Or like this anger towards, again, like immigrants is, like the reason you didn't get a promotion or a raise at work is not because of an immigrant. It's because of a billionaire. It's because of a corporation. They are the ones who are having record high profits. Again, 3,500% growth in 50 years. And you are not seeing, you are seeing 1 penny for every $1 of that, right? That is where like the gripe is coming from. And I really think that if America is ever going to rebound, it has to be this like greater class consciousness. Like we have to realize that the amount of money that we pay for everything, America is the richest country in the world, but we pay the most for healthcare out of any country in the world. Or even again, when these people have these gripes, like, how are you going to afford that? It's like tax rich people, tax corporations. There is no universe in which a corporation should ever be paying less taxes than you. Just never, right? And like their tax percentage should never be lower than you. And it is like that now. And that is not a system that is designed to help the people. That is in citizens and working class Americans. That is a system designed to extract profit from its citizens. And that is what's really scary, is like the product of America is you and I. The juice in the lemon is being squeezed dry, and we are really getting to the point where there is absolutely no juice left to squeeze, and it will collapse the economy, right? It's going to start with housing, where all these people are going to start to sell their houses and they can't do that. And then it's going to come with college, where college keeps increasing in price, and the salaries associated with college degrees are not increasing at the same level. So then people aren't going to go to college, and we're going to have now college degrees and no skilled laborers. And like these issues are going to keep perpetuating themselves until it just collapses. And that is really, I think, what is like terrifying to me many things about the state of America and sort of this death of the American dream. I really hope that people like think about that more at the very least. Like, I hope this like equipped you to like have that sort of tough conversation with your mom and dad or something, or the next time you get into a fight with them, you know, like ask them how much they paid for the house and go to an inflation adjustment calculator to today's money and show them. Be like, this is literally like you paid $100,000 for this house, and like now that would be $600,000, and like I can't do that, and neither could you probably. So with that, I don't know. Sorry, this is kind of like a deeply economic politics episode. I really am just trying to use my platform to educate people on some of the issues going on with America. And I think people really don't understand how bad it is. I've just been thinking about this a lot, especially since traveling. I was thinking I went to Japan, and like I went to Japan and got all you can drink alcohol for $14. One drink in the United States is $20. It's not because it's magically 10 times more expensive to like pour a shot of vodka here. It's just, you're being ripped off. Like that is the answer. It's not like this in other places. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much. I love you. Don't forget to follow Spotify and all that good stuff. Subscribe to the channel. Yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.